Moving fore and aft on the ski, the flex of the ankles, the alignment of the left and right body parts, along with the way the hands and arms are held, are all critical components of the ski racer's stance. Stance could be thought of as a posture or even a body position. Even though we say position, this should not be confused with an athlete being stiff or rigid. An athlete in an athletic stance is in a position with the body attitude that is balanced in each of the three cardinal planes of motion. Being balanced in the three planes results in a specific posture that is optimal to resist external forces for every moment during the entire ski turn. This was suggested when the parallel position was described in the USSA Alpine Ski Fundamentals. When in balance, the resulting body attitude gives the ski racer a point of reference in which to come back to after balance has been disrupted. Balance is normally described as a total body system. While this is technically true, balance can also be viewed along each plane independently. That is, each plane of movement has its own balance. For example, if a racer is too far forward or backwards on the skis, it is a sagittal plane balance problem. The coach should recognize this as an opportunity to dissect or partition balance into useful parts. We should not just work on balance, but on the specific plane of balance needing work. While we look at body positions, it should be realized that these positions will change for every moment during the ski turn. It should be further pointed out that stance is more than a position or even a move, but an attitude in which tension is held in the musculature during each moment in each plane during the turn and accompanying transitions. Being aligned in each of the three cardinal planes of motion is important, but the ski racer would likely succumb to gravity or external forces if the body did not have some level of tension in the muscles. Muscles with the appropriate amount of tension are in a state of readiness. As a result, they are much quicker and responsive than a muscle that is only in position and not innervated. Tension is impossible to see, but with an understanding and appreciation of external forces during the turn, approximations can be derived through viewing. Lastly, stance is essential. Without a functional stance, every aspect that follows in this presentation is futile. Attention to detail combined with a constant practice is the only way to create the solid foundation that an efficient stance will provide. Stance in its most elementary form is just balance. Everything the racer does with regards to stance is to maintain balance, or to put another way, adjust internal or body forces against external or environmental forces. Stance can be looked at a number of ways. What we have laid out in the following sections are 5 key features of stance: fore-aft movement, ankles, parallel position or wall, lateral posture, hands/elbows. Fore-aft movement, parallel position, and the lateral posture chapters coincide with the 3 planes of movement: sagittal, horizontal, and frontal planes. The ankles chapter is included as a prologue to the parallel position chapter, and the hands/elbows chapter is included because of the influence the upper extremities have on balance. While you watch the following good examples of efficient stance, notice that balance is rarely disrupted. An efficient stance leads to a balanced skier, and a balanced skier is able to ski fast. Fore-aft movement is in the sagittal plane. This is a movement that is coincident with the longitudinal axis of the ski. In essence, it is a movement towards the ski tips and a movement towards the tails. What moves? The skier's center of mass over the length of the ski, which is their base of support. In essence, the skier starts with their center mass forward and finishes the turn with their center mass farther aftward. At turn initiation, forward movement will accomplish two things. Moves the center of pressure towards the ball of the foot and pressures the front of the ski. Moving the center of pressure towards the ball of the foot will put the skier in an agile position, while pressuring the front of the ski is needed to establish a groove for the ski to follow. Moving the center of pressure towards the ball of the foot puts the athlete in a biomechanically advantageous position to move from. This is important during a redirected or a stiveted turn, where the ski will be steered a little or a lot at turn initiation. Being on the ball of the foot is a natural point in which to rotate the ski from. Also mechanically, it moves the skier to the middle of the ski. So during a redirect or stivet, there will be just as much tip as tail to rotate. A very balanced rotation results. The big deal with fore-aft movement is that it alters the center of pressure underfoot. This is important because the center of pressure influences which parts of the ski are pressured. To initiate a carved turn, the ski tip needs to slice a passageway through the snow. Pressuring the forward part of an edge ski encourages the tip to plow a path in the snow for the body of the ski to follow. While at the finish of a turn, the center of mass moves aft, shifting the center of pressure underfoot toward the calcaneus or heel bone. This adjusts the line of action of force where the bones of the skeleton line up to resist the high external forces of the turn. This is sometimes referred to as bone stacking. If the center of pressure were not shifted aftward, the skier would be left in a physically weak and compromised position toward the toes of their feet. Moving from the forward part of the ski to the aft part of the ski may also heighten the slicing action of the ski, similar to slicing a piece of bread with a knife. Another thought is that the fore-aft movement might provide a propulsive effect, similar to what a skateboarder might use. A similar response has been shown by the pumping action of a skier over terrain to utilize the kinetic energy in the bent ski tail to gain acceleration. While slicing and propulsion are only theories, they may be used as metaphorical aids in coaching to achieve positive movement on the skis. Not just any movement, but deliberate movement that contributes to balance. The pressure control fore and aft movement should be uniform and smooth, implying that the center of mass moves evenly over the skis from front to back. This even pacing of the fore-aft movement is extremely relevant to the interaction between the ski and the snow. Fore-aft movement and the resultant pressure alterations are obviously an advanced skill and should be appreciated as such. When we talk about fore-aft movement in its more primitive form, we are usually talking about just staying centered or balanced somewhere along the length of the foot. So the most elementary arrangement is the skier positioned somewhere between their bindings. An unfortunate situation that gives fore-aft movement a bad reputation is the athlete that is using the back of the boot for balance. The boots should be used to balance and not for balance. The athlete that can stay approximately centered is in a good starting position. While the back of the boot is a handy feature, it should be for emergency use only and never used to intentionally create aft pressure. We should be careful with our coaching that we do not imply that centered is an absolute position. Good ski racers will start to experiment, even unconsciously, with a greater range of fore-aft motion, and the coach should respect this and understand the ramifications of this movement. One indication of fore-aft movement is the tip and/or tail of the ski in the air. This should not be confused with desirable technique. Ideally, both skis are on the snow with movement coming from the tension in the ankles along with flexion and extension in the knees and hips. This results in the alteration of the center of mass, which in turn repositions the center of pressure along the foot. Due to difficult sets or extreme conditions, there are times when it is all even the elite ski racer can do to just stay balanced between the bindings. Although the athlete is balanced and in control, they are not experiencing the pressure control precision they could if skills were more refined. To develop more fore-aft domination, the athlete must be put in situations that challenge recentering forward and movement through the foot. If the pressure is excess on the ski tip at edge engagement, the ski will carve out a trough that is deeper than is necessary to hold the ski. This overplowing essentially pushes excess snow, which slows the skier. Conversely, if the forward part of the ski is not pressured sufficiently, the tip will not be allowed into the snow with enough bite to carve out an adequate trough in which to hold against the high external forces in the turn. With this in mind, it should be easy to see the importance of pressure control as a skill. This pressure control skill is difficult to observe, so mastery should not be assumed just because the ski racer is making the desired overt and extreme body movements. Command of pressure control is an extremely difficult skill to master, but mastery will be the key to finding those hundredths of a second. Modern giant slalom racing is outside ski dominant. This means the lion's share of work is performed by the ski that is on the outermost radii of the skiing arc. We want the skier with an ankle attitude that will provide balance against external forces and create a biomechanical range of motion such that they can create efficient and effective fore-aft, side-to-side, and rotational movements. Boots should be set up so that the skier, when standing on their skis, is equally balanced fore and aft. This will provide the ski racer with the greatest usable sagittal range of motion. Bias to either direction will decrease the effective usage of the ski. Ankles are flexed such that the skier's center mass, when standing, will fall mid-length of the boot. While we say flexion, we should delineate the difference between flexion and tension. Flexion is the position, and it is what we see, but what is inside the boot is equally important. Tension created by the musculature of the ankle is what will make or break the balance and control. Ankles need to be innervated with tension so they are ready to respond. Ski racers should use the boot to balance, not for balance. The boot is stiff and the musculature inside should be also. Stiff plastic is not always the reason boots appear too stiff. The boots often appear too stiff because the muscular tension of the foot inside that boot is overly lax. Balance is established via the outside ankle. This ankle angle is then matched with the inside ankle. Maintaining equal ankle angle flexion and tension throughout all phases of the turn is essential for modern GS skiing. A prerequisite of stance is equal ankle flexion. When on a slope, this equal ankle flexion results in the uphill foot shifted forward of the downhill foot. This foot forward or lead change is not a fabricated position, but a result of being on a slope while maintaining equal angles in both ankles. To create an efficient skiing stance in the horizontal plane, this lead change is then mimicked up the entire body, with the uphill knee being forward of the downhill knee, the uphill hip forward of the downhill hip, and the uphill shoulder forward of the downhill shoulder. The result is each body part on the uphill side of the body remaining at the same angle forward of the corresponding downhill body part. If we connect all left and right body parts, feet, knees, hips, and shoulders, we could imagine it as a wall of sorts, a warped wall, but the important point is that the wall keeps the same relative forward aspect throughout the entire turn. This relative forwardness will be constantly changing. As the skier turns, the effective slope steepness between the 2 feet will be getting more or less. As a result, the amount of lead change in the feet and skis will be changing. Therefore, what was 15 centimeters of lead change at one moment is reduced to 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, until 0 or no lead change, when lead change immediately starts increasing in the opposite direction, 1, 2, 3, 4 centimeters, until in that turn it reverses direction again. Keeping this wall alignment, or same amount of lead change between all left and right body parts throughout the turn, is an essential aspect of horizontal balance. If any part of the body moves out of this wall alignment, the resulting stance is either overly rotated or overly counter-rotated, and efficiency of movement is compromised. For example, if the skier is in a hip-width stance and the skis have a lead change of 12 centimeters and the hips have a lead change of 6 centimeters, the skier has a reduced available range of motion in the hip joint. While not a detriment during non-challenging skiing, this reduced hip flexion range of motion will increase the chances that even a slight perturbation may disrupt balance or hinder the influence the skier has on ski-snow interaction. Ski racers do not assume this symmetric position because of aesthetics. This body attitude is a result of the ski's relationship with the hill. While the skier is on a slope, the effective steepness of the slope has to do with how much the skis are oriented across the hill. While in a traverse, the skis are pointed across the hill, leaving 1 foot higher than the other. Conversely, there is a point in the middle of the turn when the skis are pointed straight down the hill and the 2 feet are equal in elevation. As the skier moves through the turn, the slope steepness between the 2 feet constantly changes. Every centimeter the skis move in the turn, there is a slight elevation increase or decrease between the 2 feet until they are equal in elevation. At this moment, they will reverse direction and the previously lower foot gradually becoming the new upper foot. Since the ankles are maintaining equal flexion, there is a concurrent, gradual, and constant shifting of their fore and aft positions. It must be remembered that the wall first requires equal ankle flexion, and then mimicking this resulting lead change up the body creates the wall. Mimicking a lead change that is not based on equal ankle flexion will not only result in inefficient stance, but inhibit horizontal balance. Any flexing or extending to attenuate terrain changes will be taken up by both ankles simultaneously, so they may always be at the same degree of flexion. When coaching, we know the best feedback comes from the athletes themselves. If they find one of the connecting pieces of the wall out of position, too far forward or too far aft, they immediately will know and can make the necessary adjustment. With this wall as a reference of correctness for stance, the athlete, through muscular tonus as a result of the stretch reflexes in the muscles, will find themselves returning to balance when course sets or conditions become challenging. Elite ski racers are oftentimes seen getting out of balance, and we are amazed that they can come back into balance. The key is having pre-innervated muscles and a reference of correctness or a position that they are always striving to return to. This is a key prerequisite to them taking risk and partly explains the superhuman recoveries we see. In essence, their muscles are already returning to the correct position even before they got out of balance. Staying in balance is not always being in the correct position, but a result of the musculature trying to achieve that correct position. If the muscles are innervated and goal-directed, the skier will return back to the reference of correctness, creating a balanced position. Key points of the wall are equal ankle flexion, a similar lead up the entire body that constantly changes during the turn, and muscles need to have tension and intent to create a reference of correctness. Lateral posture refers to body movements sideways or laterally. How the ski racer moves in the frontal plane sideways or laterally to maintain balance against external forces and edge the ski or skis is the basis behind lateral posture. Part of the mystique behind giant slalom lies in its dual personalities. On one hand, GS involves high turn forces, while a couple turns later, it is a delicate balance between ski and snow requiring precision and grace. This requires differing methods of edging and holding the edge along a wide continuum. When speeds are fast and there is a lot of distance between gates, we see the skier body attitude inclined as one unit, stacking the bones to resist the high forces. This inclination should not be confused with banking. That is usually the result of the skier using upper body rotation. This upper body rotation ends up tipping the skier into the turn. One way to tell the difference between inclination and banking is to check for the wall. Inclination will have an appropriate wall with the left and right body parts moving in unison. Banking will usually have the shoulders and or hips rotated in the direction of the turn, twisting the wall. The other side of the continuum is angulation. While inclination implies the body is relatively lined up, angulation is the act or resultant position of making angles with the body. The most significant angle formed is between the upper and lower body. This angle, created at the hip, is a critical juncture due to the strength of the hip, the available range of motion, and the proximity to the center of mass. In this chapter, we have been talking about frontal plane movement. This may seem odd since the hip has limited flexion in the frontal plane. Although when the skier has an efficient wall, the resultant body position will be biased toward the downhill. This slight downhill body attitude aligns the pelvis so that the hip can flex more in the sagittal plane, which has a large range of motion. Hip angulation, solely in the frontal plane, is very limited. Due to this limited range of motion, the spine attempts to contribute to edging, but ends up leaving the skier in an inefficient position. This lateral flexion of the spine and its inadequate range of motion does not allow for efficient edging or pressuring of the ski. Hip flexion that is more biased in the sagittal plane allows for a larger range of motion. This also permits the skier to resist the high forces in the turn and increases the skier's ability to adjust edge and modulate pressure during the turn. Lateral posture refers to movement in the frontal plane. While the ski racer does many actions, the largest movements that occur in the frontal plane are inclination and angulation. These are used mainly to resist the centripetal outward pull during the turn. Since these are performed to usually increase edge angle, the resulting body position is important. This body position starts with one foot being higher than the other due to the slope of the hill. This attitude is then mimicked up the entire body. Since the edge angle desired or needed is a result of snow conditions, speed, skis, tune, and other conditions, the lower and upper body, with all their degrees of freedom, adjust accordingly. This makes any generalization precarious, but as a loose rule of thumb, the hips and shoulders will match the angle of the hill. While a loose rule of thumb, it is a good starting point for movement analysis. Stance involves the entire body. Position and movements of the upper body, specifically the arms, elbows, and hands, can greatly influence the skier's position on the ski and thus the ski turn. The movements of the arms, elbows, and hands may be small, but their effect on balance and technique can be enormous. As humans, most things we do in our lives revolve around what we do with our hands. Hands become our link to the world, and our body has evolved such that our arms and hands articulate in front of our eyes and in front of our body. Indeed, in front of our body is where the hands should stay in ski racing. A general rule of thumb is hands higher than the waist, elbows in front of the torso, and hands wider than the elbows. With this general limb posture, the hands can be used for aerodynamic advantage or as a correction for center of mass miscalculation. Although we do not want to see them waving around in space, they can assist with balance. The upper limb of the skier includes the upper arm or humerus, lower arm or radius and ulna, and the hand, which carries the weight of the glove and ski pole. When added together, each limb accounts for 4.8% of the total mass of the skier. So with nearly 5% of the entire mass, the limbs, when extended outward, can create a large moment of inertia, which can greatly affect the position of the skier's center of mass. This can be either positive or negative. The upper limb can assist with adjusting the center of mass so that the skier will maintain balance, or conversely, limb movement can move the skier's center of mass enough to compromise equilibrium. It must be pointed out that any adjustment made with the upper body limbs will most likely also affect aerodynamics. Coaching effective hand position is important. Muscles have endogenous tonus properties that assist them in maintaining a relative position. When the athlete is coached to a reference location, they will, in time, create a reflexive response that will reorient the limb or limbs back to the desired posture. While we don't want athletes stiff and statue-like, they need to be able to respond with prepared, innervated muscles that will efficiently return after perturbation to the desired position. Giving an athlete a reference of correctness for their upper limbs is essential for balance. Again, the general rule is hands higher than the waist, elbows in front of the torso, and hands wider than the elbows. When working efficiently, the role of the arms, elbows, and hands are important, and not so much what they do, but what they appear not to do. While they maintain their relative position, their muscular tension is a fine balance between flaccid and overly stiff. While hands can assist in a balance predicament, hands can also lead to balance problems. A hand that is punched forward or a hand that is narrower than the elbows can inhibit balance. When the outside hand moves forward in the direction of the turn, a potential and detrimental rotary impulse on the shoulder is imparted. This excess rotary action is then transferred to the pelvis, which can affect the ski, resulting in too much rotation, causing it to lose its edge and the tail sliding out. While we laugh at the chicken wing skier, this is a natural or reflexive position that is essentially hardwired into the skier's central nervous system. This is often seen in beginning skiers. Rotation of the lower limbs is equally produced in the upper limbs. This innate nervous system connection is hard to break. When the upper limb rotation mimics the lower limb rotation, it can leave the pelvis in a compromised position. The latissimus dorsi is a large and strong back muscle. The lat has an insertion in the upper arm or humerus and the pelvis, specifically the iliac crest. With the arm connected to the pelvis, any movement of the arm can also have an effect on the pelvis. When the outside arm is internally rotated, resulting in the chicken wing or elbow out position, the lat, which is connected to the rotating arm, pulls on the pelvis. While not always detrimental, the end result is that the pelvis position will be compromised if the skier encounters any perturbation. This arm movement reduces or limits the useful range of motion of the pelvis. The skier's center mass is located essentially in the pelvis, so anything that compromises the pelvis will have a direct effect on the skier's center mass and therefore balance. Hand movement is responsible for altering the center mass by three methods. First, their position relative to the skier's center mass. Second, by creating excess rotary action to the shoulder. And lastly, by the pull of the lat on the pelvis, negatively promoting an excess rotational stimulus. Hands are not technique, but their actions or inefficiencies can negatively influence technique. While they contribute little to technique, they can drastically create negative situations.